Change or perish. That is the message coming out of what is described as the most important meeting of our lifetime. COP26, the Climate Change Summit in Glasgow, Scotland. Many of us are tied up with our own challenges right now, either related to COVID-19 or the related financial setbacks. This video is meant to provide a quick summary of what is transpiring at the meeting and our overall status with regards to climate change. Some of you may have had the fortune of seeing the opening ceremonies and the speeches delivered by Prince Philip of Wales, Sir David Attenborough of England, and Mia Mottley, Prime Minister of Barbados. These exhilarating speeches captured the big picture, the root cause, and the solutions. This video will feature a few highlight clips of these speeches. So let's begin with examining the big picture.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the COVID-19 pandemic has shown us just how devastating a global cross-border threat can be. Climate change and biodiversity loss are no different. In fact, they pose an even greater existential threat, to the extent that we have to put ourselves on what might be called a warlike footing.
We are already in trouble. The stability we all depend on is breaking. This story is one of inequality as well as instability. Today, those who've done the least to cause this problem are being the hardest hit. Ultimately, all of us will feel the impact, some of which are now unavoidable. Is this how our story is due to end? A tale of the smartest species doomed by that all-too-human characteristic of failing to see the bigger picture in pursuit of short-term goals.
Our world, my friends, stands at a fork in the road. One no less significant than when the United Nations was formed in 1945. But then, the majority of our countries here did not exist. We exist now. The difference is we want to exist 100 years from now. And if our existence is to mean anything, then we must act in the interests of all of our people who are dependent on us. And if we don't, we will allow the path of greed and selfishness to sow the seeds of our common destruction. The leaders of today, not 2030, not 2050, must make this choice. It is in our hands. Code red to the G7 countries. Code red to the G20. 1.5 is what we need to survive. 2 degrees, yes, SG, is a death sentence for the people of Antigua and Barbuda, for the people of the Maldives, for the people of Dominica and Fiji, for the people of Kenya and Mozambique, and yes, for the people of Samoa and Barbados. We do not want that dreaded death sentence.
Humanity is facing 3 existential crises at the same time. 1, current and emerging global pandemics. 2, climate change and environmental erosion. And 3, ongoing and historic social unrest and conflict. To resolve these threats would require global collaboration and cooperation across all sectors and levels of society. We have never demonstrated the ability to cooperate on that level. And our performance in the management of COVID-19 has demonstrated how difficult, if not impossible, it is for us to work together as one species.
The pandemic has taught us that national solutions to global problems do not work.
If working apart, we are a force powerful enough to destabilize our planet, surely Working together, we are powerful enough to save it.
We operate in what I call a state of civil hypocrisy. Civil hypocrisy occurs when the values and principles we aspire to in our churches, synagogues, temples, and mosques are not reflected in our day-to-day policies, practices, and culture. We have been aware of the threat and consequences of climate change and environmental erosion for more than 50 years. However, we chose to put the future of humanity in peril in pursuit of profit. And that mindset continues in Glasgow as we see the conversation shift from lives and environment to economics.
Who pays and how? More than 300 of the world's leading CEOs and institutional investors have told me that alongside the promises countries have made, their nationally determined contributions, they need clear market signals agreed globally so that they have the confidence to invest without the goalposts suddenly moving.
The real question being asked is, who will profit? We operate from a paradigm that we cannot solve a problem unless we can profit from it. Every problem is seen as an opportunity for revenue. And in recent history, we have been manufacturing social problems in order to generate revenue. Destruction of our planet is not a revenue-generating opportunity. It's our responsibility to leave something for the next generation. We have the collective intelligence to achieve sustainability for our planet and our species. The question is, do we have the spiritual maturity? Do we have it in our hearts and in our conscience to do the right thing?
And I say to you, there is a sword that can cut down this Gordian knot, and it has been wielded before. The central banks of the wealthiest countries engaged in $25 trillion of quantitative easing in the last 13 years. 25 trillion. Of that, 9 trillion was in the last 18 months to fight the pandemic. Had we used that 25 trillion to purchase bonds, to finance the energy transition, or the transition of how we eat, or how we move ourselves in transport, we would now today be reaching that 1.5 degrees limit that is so vital to us. I say to you today in Glasgow that an annual increase in the SDRs of $500 billion a year for 20 years, put in a trust to finance the transition, is the real gap, Secretary General, that we need to close, not the 50 billion being proposed for adaptation. And if 500 billion sounds big to you, guess what? It is just 2% of the 25 trillion. This is the sword we need to wield.
The only way we can save ourselves from ourselves is a radical evolution of consciousness amongst global leaders. We are in denial that our current leadership structures are grounded in greed, exploitation, and divisiveness. Until we have government systems and structures that allow us to make decisions that are sincerely in the interest of the greater good, we will continue to place the next generation in peril. The most critical component of this change initiative is the mindset change. We must shift our mindset from one of greed and exploitation to one of responsibility and morality. A wide-scale rise in consciousness amongst our global leaders, particularly leaders of industry, is very unlikely. What we have to focus on is building the values and principles of our next generation of leaders and hope that the planet and humanity survives long enough for them to take control and begin to repair the damage we've done. key to this paradigm shift is the inclusion of spiritual intelligence in our education and corporate training programs. Spiritual intelligence is the science of doing the right thing. Our intellectual, physical, and emotional intelligence have taken tremendous evolutionary steps in the last 200 years. However, our spiritual intelligence, that which guides our morality and integrity, is far behind. We have the collective competence to fix all the problems we have and leave a sustainable world for future generations. What we lack is the character and the conscience to do the right thing. It's time we shake the shackles of greed and selfishness and do what's in the best interest of humanity.